The second point, we may be gathered here discussing democracy. Democracy is under threat in Africa. Very serious. I'm sure you know what happened yesterday. You know what happened last month. And it's going to continue. Oh yes, there's no apology about it. I can predict with mathematical exactitude the next country, very close to us, that will experience a coup very soon.
Soldiers celebrated as coup leaders announced the country's president, who had just secured a third term in office, had been...
The human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, has predicted the next coup in Africa. He says a country that is very close to Nigeria, that coup is going to happen there. He says, I can predict this mathematically, there is no two ways about it. He says that the coup will continue in Africa as far as African leaders are refusing to listen to their people. He spoke at a Nigerian Labour Congress NLC National Symposium held in Abuja on Thursday. Falana accused Nigeria's ruling class of taking the people for granted. According to him, despite the poverty in the country, the National Assembly allocated billions to itself. The theme of the symposium was Nigerian economy and the crisis of survival, robbing the poor to pay the rich. His comment comes on the heels of recent coup in Africa. The latest was in Gabon, where soldiers seized power, ending decades of the Bongo dynasty reign. The development has triggered the condemnation from within and outside the continent. President Bola Tinubu had described the wave of coup in Africa as a contagious autocracy. However, Femi Falana has disagreed with the leaders that are condemning the coup. He said that this coup is justified because of the high level of poverty in Africa.
The second point, we may be gathered here discussing democracy. Democracy is under threat in Africa. Very serious. I'm sure you know what happened yesterday. You know what happened last month. And it's going to continue. Oh yes, there's no apology about it. I can predict with mathematical exactitude the next country, very close to us, that will experience a coup very soon. Where a man currently suffering from dementia, who has been in power since 1982. What did he do yesterday because of what happened in Gabon? Let me change the commander of the army. You are deceiving yourself. There was a coup, attempted coup in 2019 in Gabon. The guy survived, but you know what has happened? Yesterday, he also suffers from stroke and dementia. He didn't know where he was. He said, I don't know where I am. But please help me. That is what they have reduced Africa to. You needed to have seen that guy when there was very insulting their meeting, going to Europe to meet about Africa. Franco-Afro summit. The guy couldn't walk. And none of his colleagues in the club of African dictators, African Union, none of them will say, gentlemen, why don't you resign and let a functional person take over the affairs of your country? This guy had stroke since 2009. With the wealth of that country, he couldn't establish a hospital. He was in Britain for years and then went to Morocco. Just like Mobutu Sese Seko, 35 years in power, no hospital. Eyadema was being flown to Israel after 32 years in office. He couldn't fix a hospital like this. This gang of looters here. And that is what they have made of Africa.
Equally, Femi Falana has also approved the assertion of some political analysts who are saying that these leaders are the cause of this coup, that this military coup normally supposed to be condemned by everyone. But in a situation where a coup will happen and everybody will be happy, is an indication that things has not been going well, that there is no democracy, because democracy is the government of the people. I think the people are supposed to be happy that they have democracy. But anytime the people turn their back against a democratic government, it means that the definition of democracy cannot be validated in these countries.
One of the most politically unstable regions in addition to insecurity as well as economic decline. So basically, people are wondering what's happening. But again, when you talk to political analysts in the region, they will tell you about the deprivations, the economic malaise, the insecurity that's been there, and the inability of governments in power, democratically elected governments in power, to deal with these situations. Corruption is also one of the major factors. And now it will be interesting to see how the African Union reacts to this. We know their initial reaction is to suspend countries, member countries that where coups have taken place. We've seen that with Mali, we've seen that with Burkina Faso, Guinea, and now Niger. And it's expected very soon they will also announce that Gabon is suspended from the membership of the African Union. But what is interesting is we hardly will see any effective sanctions being applied on Gabon simply because of its mineral resources, something that we've seen happening in Mali and Burkina Faso right now. The expectation of many political analysts in West Africa and Central Africa was that when there is a coup, the strangulation, economic strangulation, should be applied to enforce the rule that the military should go back to the barracks and restore democracy. But what we continue to say in these countries is that mining of mineral resources and oil continue in those countries. So basically, people are watching. But here in Niger, people are just waking up to the news, and it will gladden the heart of the military authorities here that at least one other African country have seen their way, at least. Marlene?
Okay, Ahmed Idris there for us in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Let's get the perspective of Owigwe Agwego. He's a security analyst for Afropolitica, which is a security consultancy. He joins us now from Ankara. Firstly, give us your understanding of what is happening in Gabon at the moment.
Yes, I think with the coup in Gabon, it came as a surprise, but to some extent, not really, because if you go back to 2016, for instance, where there was an election, the election was seen as fraudulent. People protested, and that was Ali Bongo's second election. Then there was a coup attempt in 2019, and they cited the fact that those elections were fraudulent and was not really representative of the will of the people. So we fast forward to last weekend's election. Again, we're seeing the same pattern of people thinking they voted in one direction, or they were never given an opportunity to vote for the candidate that they chose. And that kind of widespread dissatisfaction with the electoral process, I think I have to underscore this fact that the coup in Gabon is very different from what we are seeing in other parts of West Africa, because while that is more about security and governance, this is specifically about the electoral process, because time and time again, we see these patterns repeat in Gabon, and the military comes in and they make the same argument.
That's a very good point that you make there. So what you're saying is there will be support for this coup?
Yes, already. If you look at the streets of Gabon, people are celebrating and celebrating the coup. And even if you look at the statement of the pushes, you would see that they are very much specifically talking about transition and restoration of institutions. So again, that goes back to, like I said, the electoral process, and they're dissolving all of the institutions like the Senate, hoping that in the transition process they would maybe look at the constitution and also look at how to strengthen state institutions regarding political process.
I guess the question is what happens next and how united is the military in what is taking place right now. We've been listening to our correspondent talk about the influence of France in Gabon, the historical influence, the two military bases that exist in France at the moment. I mean, how do you think that's going to play into things?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the latest blow to French influence on the continent. Very recently, President Macron was talking about democracy. And it's very interesting to know that he didn't even, no comments yet, but I'm sure they're going to condemn this coup, just like they did condemn the previous attempt in 2019. The African Union also will step in to condemn this. But Gabon plays a very strategic role for France. It has two bases in the country. Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels of oil per day. But all of that has not really translated to economic progress for the country. However, I think what is key to watch out for is how ECOWAS is going to respond, because while we have been seeing coups in West Africa and ECOWAS has been in the spotlight, this is now the first we're seeing in Central Africa, and how they're going to respond to this, if they are going to follow the same script as ECOWAS and in tackling the issue in Gabon.
We have, of course, seen this increasingly anti-French sentiment in other West African nations, more notably in Niger recently. Is it a similar situation in Gabon?
Yes, the coup in Gabon I think it's more about dissatisfaction with the electoral process and the fact that one family has ruled the country for about 56 years. You know, before Ali Bongo, his father, he took over from his father in 2009. You know, and his father ruled for 40 years. So it is seen as the democratic process doesn't really work. And France might not really be keen to complain about this type of dynasty kind of rule. But people in the country, I think, unlike in Mali and Burkina Faso, where we are seeing Russian flags, there's no indication of that yet. So it is, and the sentiment is not necessarily about anti-France, like we're seeing in Niger and Mali, but more about determining the future of Gabon and focusing more on its own electoral processes.
Let's talk a little bit more then about the country. As you say, rich in oil, it's an OPEC member, it's also a key producer of this energy transitional material like magnesium. I mean, we know the borders have been shut. I mean, what are the wider international ramifications of what is going on there?
Yeah, the oil markets are still stable. They don't seem to be responding to this shock. But that is because, like I did say, Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels per day, so not so much significant, but not enough to cause shock across oil markets. However, I think it's crucial to watch closely how regional countries and regional countries are going to respond, because that would determine whether or not this is going to be a coup that stays or a coup that will not be able to to handle the pressure, and that's something to watch out for. Again, we need to also look at what is the state of former President Bongo, if he's in good condition or if we've not seen anything about that, and that will be something to watch out for also.
Okay, really good to get your perspective. Obigwe Agwegu, a security analyst for Afropolitica, speaking to us there from Ankara.